And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, and it's great to have you guys here on this Wednesday, April 3rd. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate and get your comments recognized, make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, that really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker on the bottom of the show segment down below. So with that being said, let's get right into what we are going to talk about for today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about Deshaun Watson, him talking about his rehab on his podcast. So we'll get into that. Expectations for the Browns going into the 2024 season. Then in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the New York Jets once again because, again, I've talked about them a lot recently, but I wanted to talk about Hassan Reddick's comments on joining the Jets as well as Mike Williams' recovery time as well. So we'll get into all that in the second part of the show. Then, third part of the show, talk about Tyler Boyd, a little bit more potential suitors for him. I know I talked about him yesterday when I did my Steelers segment, but also want to talk about him today as well. And then in the final part of the show, I'll talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, a couple of things with them. So they brought back Clyde Edwards-Helaire. J.K. Dobbins did visit them. He's still a free agent and could potentially, was potentially signing with I shouldn't say he was potentially going to sign with the Chiefs, but they were a potential suitor, and now he could be going elsewhere, just with now them bringing back Edwards-Helaire. Sorry, I worded that weirdly. But anyways, that's what we will get into in the final part of the show. So let's get into the first topic, which is talking about Deshaun Watson and what he had to say regarding his recovery. So last year, had a season-ending shoulder injury, got surgery. The Browns, they went through Joe Flacco, later in the season, but you had Dorian Thompson-Robinson starting. You had P.J. Walker starting, Joe Flacco, Jeff Driscoll. Well, Jeff Driscoll they just brought in to start the final game of the regular season. But still, Browns went through a lot of starting quarterbacks last season, including Deshaun Watson. And they were able to make the playoffs. Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year. Give him a lot of credit because that's definitely a situation that was very tough to navigate. And Joe Flacco for them was a revelation, bringing him in and how he played. Got the Browns to the playoffs. Now, again, season didn't end great because the Texans blew them out, but give them a lot of credit for getting into the playoffs with the situation that they were dealing with throughout the season. But yeah, Deshaun Watson commented on his rehab. So, looking at an article from NFL.com that I believe has some quotes. So this is what he said. So he said the situation is good. He said this on his QB Unplugged podcast. Again, I've never heard of these podcasts. I didn't realize a lot of these players have podcasts. Because when you think of podcasts, obviously the Kelsey brothers, come to mind because New Heights is just really taken off. But yeah, never really have heard of some of these podcasts that these players have. But anyways, so he said the situation is good. We're in a great spot, right where we need to be. We have plenty of time to ramp up the throwing sessions and things like that, but everything is going pretty smooth. As long as I'm feeling well and the doctors and physical therapists and everyone are on the same page, we're in a good spot. So, yeah, that's encouraging if you're a Browns fan to know that, the rehab is going well. But ultimately, Browns fans are worried about results. And how is that going to translate once Deshaun Watson is playing in meaningful games in September? And yeah, since he joined the Browns, it has not been great. It has not been great by any means. Now, he has shown flashes, but other than that, it's been pretty lackluster since he's joined the Browns. And the Browns invested so much in him, making that big trade with the Texans to get him. And that trade has kind of helped the Texans more than the Browns. And it was kind of poetic, I guess, I don't, if you want to call it poetic, that They made this trade. The Browns get Deshaun Watson. And the Texans, they're the team that knocks them out of the playoffs with their new quarterback, C.J. Stroud. But, yeah, it really just, for the Browns, it hasn't panned out. And you see what Baker Mayfield's doing in Tampa. Maybe the Browns, in the back of their minds, are saying, maybe we should have held on to Baker. Because you got to remember, Baker in 2021 did not play well, but that's because he was playing with the shoulder injury himself. And they went in a different direction and brought in Deshaun Watson, and hasn't panned out because didn't play that much in 2022, 7 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and then didn't play that much in 2023, 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. The turnovers have been an issue too, but you could just tell he's not the same player. And now he's coming back from another injury. After, again, having a long time of being out, because obviously he was out, missed the entire 2021 season for the whole off-the-field stuff that we don't have to get into, but you guys know what I'm talking about. Missed a whole season of that because of that. Comes back in 2022. Again, won some games for the Browns, but again, didn't look great, and didn't look great in 2023. So now he's coming off of a shoulder injury. Again, missed a lot of time. How is he going to perform? And to be honest, I think you kind of have to expect more of the same. The way his trajectory has been going. And the Browns have a solid team. They have a good defense, led by Myles Garrett. And then on the offensive side of the ball, you're hoping Nick Chubb comes back healthy. But look at the receiving core that they have. Again, it's not spectacular, but I think, it has potential to be good. Amari Cooper's been good for them. I know Jerry Jeudy has not been great since he's been drafted into the NFL, and I talked about this, and the Browns gave him a lot of money, even though it might not be worth it. But, again, I think he could be okay for them. And then you have Elijah Moore. You have David Njoku, who was a stud last season. And they have a solid offensive line. So the Browns have the pieces in place. It's just, it comes down to Deshaun Watson and his performance. And I don't think you're going to see the Deshaun Watson that we saw in Houston. And I think a lot of people are in agreement with that. And yeah, the last 2 seasons he's played in 6 games. Let's see if I can get the... Yeah, so these are his individual stats from 2023. So he went 16... Now, the Browns did beat the Bengals 24-3, but Watson only went 16-29, 154 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Then against the Steelers, 22-40, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Against the Titans, he had a pretty good performance. 27-33, 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Was sacked 3 times. Was sacked 6 times against the Steelers. Colts only completed 1 pass. He got hurt in that game. Against the Cardinals, only went 9. I mean, they won 27-0, so he really didn't have to do that much. 19-30, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Was sacked 1 time. And then against the Ravens, 20-34, 213 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Was sacked 4 times. And if you remember, I think he threw a pick 6 on the first play of the game. It was deflected up in the air, and Kyle Hamilton picked it off and ran it in for a pick 6. And that was the last game he played. And then after that, yeah, was out for the year. And now here we are in the off season, and him talking about his recovery. So again, the Browns have a good team, but ultimately what is going to probably hold them back is Deshaun Watson's level of play. Because I don't think you're going to see that quarterback from the Texans. I don't think you're going to see that. You're going to see more of what you saw before the injury. Now, does that mean that the Browns are going to be a really bad team because of it? No. Or have a bad record? I don't think so. The Browns are going to be in the mix. And if you have a healthy Nick Chubb and you could rely on that running game, that will also help. That'll take some pressure off of him. And maybe that's what you're going to have to run through the offense, is the running game, is Nick Chubb. But, again, only time will tell. But, again, Deshaun Watson has shown flashes with the Browns. But it hasn't been that much. You've seen more bad than good. So, I'm not really expecting this bounce back season from him. I'm expecting more of what we've seen. Now, can I be wrong? Absolutely. And I'll be the first. And when we progress through the season next year, and the Browns are one of the best teams in the NFL, and Deshaun Watson is playing at an MVP level, then I will come out and say, yeah, I was wrong. But it's just, there's been no indication that he's going to be the Deshaun Watson from when he was with the Texans. Because when he was with the Texans, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And it's just all that time off. It really, I think that's really what it comes down to, is all that time off. That's really affected him in the long run. And now, again, a season-ending injury, that didn't help. You know, in the last 3 years now, he's played a combined 12 games. And the Browns, again, they traded for him, they gave up a lot to get him, and they signed him to that massive deal. So they kind of got their hands tied. You're stuck with this now. And they're probably regretting it, like I said. So they're going to have to deal with it. But again, at least from just his recovery aspect, that he's, like he said on his podcast, he's progressing well. So at least the Browns know we're going to have our starting quarterback week 1 of 2024. Now, there's a possibility that they could be that team that plays the Eagles week 1 in Brazil. But if not, it's going to be the Packers. So the Browns, they could be opening up at home. They could be opening up on the road. Who knows? Again, the schedule is going to come out next month. And once that happens, we're going to break down everything. Go through the team schedules and things like that. But first we got to get through the draft. So, got to see what the Browns end up doing. But, yeah, I mean, that's what's going to hold them back, is if Deshaun Watson does not play well, this team is not, don't expect this team to really, again, they could make the playoffs, but don't expect them to go far. That's ultimately what's going to hold them back. I mean, look what happened in the playoff game against the Texans. Again, Joe Flacco, loved that story. That was great to watch. You thought we were going to maybe see another run out of Joe Flacco, another January Joe, but that ended up not happening. And he threw 2 pick sixes. Now, again, the Browns' defense was getting shredded, but the 2 pick sixes that Flacco threw did not help. So, and Deshaun Watson, before he got hurt, was turning the ball over. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. If you guys have a different opinion on this, let me know in the comments. Because again, for me, I think you're gonna see more of what you saw from Deshaun Watson. Before the injury, you're gonna see that. Now, again, the Browns were still winning games, but still, if the Browns are gonna want to, be a part of that Super Bowl conversation, Deshaun Watson's going to have to play better. And I just don't think that's going to happen. Just, again, because of just the fact that he's played in 12 games combined over the last 3 years, counting 2021 where he didn't play at all. So, it's, my trajectory with him, it's going down. So, but again, if you have a different opinion, let me know. So when we come back from our first break of the show, I'm going to talk about the Jets some more, talk about Hassan Reddick, what he had to say about joining the Jets, as well as Mike Williams' recovery. timeline. So we'll get into all that. Well, at least what Robert Saleh had to say regarding it. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.